Have you ever realized that the people who are supposed to love you the most can also hurt you the deepest? I did, the day my family told me I was on my own. Man, you have no idea how it feels when your parents, the people you grew up believing would always protect you, suddenly make it clear you are nothing to us unless you have already proven yourself. I was 28, working 2 jobs just to pay rent, still paying off my student loans, and trying to hold my life together. I thought family was supposed to be a safety net. I was wrong. It started when my sister got that condo downtown. She had always had it easy. Perfect grades, perfect relationships, perfect career trajectory. And my parents, of course, loved reminding me of it every chance they got. "Look at her," my dad said at dinner one night, swirling his wine. "She has everything you are still working for." My mom nodded, eyes glinting with that mix of pride and criticism, the kind that tells you you are permanently failing no matter how hard you try. I just sat there, fork in hand, swallowing down the humiliation as usual. But this time was different. I had started to notice a pattern. My sister's successes weren't just celebrated, they were showcased. Every small achievement of hers became a public event in our family, while mine were whispered about or dismissed entirely. And then, when I asked for help with my own apartment, a loan or even guidance, suddenly I was on my own. "We cannot help you with everything," my mom said, like it was a lesson in independence. But it felt more like punishment. I remember the day clearly. I had saved up for months to move into a slightly better place, closer to work, somewhere that felt like progress. I called my parents, hoping for a little support, maybe even a loan or at least some advice. My dad laughed sharp and cold. "You are on your own," he said. "This is your life. Stop looking at your sister's path and walk your own." That laugh. It was the final slap. I hung up, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of something else. Anger, yes, but also clarity. That night, I walked past my sister's new condo on the way home. It was all polished marble floors, stainless steel appliances, and that red ribbon tied across the front door, the same kind of grand opening style she always loved. That ribbon, man. It was like a flashing neon sign that screamed, "She is everything you are not." I stopped and stared, something tight and furious twisting in my chest. I thought about everything she had taken for granted, everything my parents had handed her while I scraped by. And then a thought struck me. What if I did not ask for help? What if I took control on my own terms without them? I started small. Every night after work, I researched ways to invest. I read every blog, book, and forum I could find on real estate, stocks, and side hustles. I talked to people who had done it all themselves. No family safety net, no inherited advantages, just grit and strategy. It was exhausting, but for the first time, it felt empowering. I was finally building my life for me, not to earn their approval. Then came the turning point. My sister invited me over one evening, bragging about her condo like she always did. "Come see the view," she said, voice dripping with that smugness I hated. I smiled and agreed. But I did not go to admire the condo. I went to observe, to study, to plan. I took note of her patterns, her vulnerabilities, the ways she relied on our parents and her connections to maintain her status. It was not cruelty, it was preparation. And I realized that if I was going to claim my own independence, I needed to be smarter, faster, and more relentless than anyone else in the family. Over the next few months, I worked tirelessly. I found a small apartment near downtown, paid for it outright, and started flipping properties I could afford. My initial investments were modest, but I reinvested every penny of profit back into new projects. I was exhausted, often working 16-hour days, but every night I went to bed knowing I was finally building something that belonged solely to me. I did not tell my family. I did not seek approval. The quiet, private victories tasted sweeter than anything they could have offered. The first real test came when my sister started noticing my progress. She called one evening, voice sharp and tinged with suspicion. "I heard you are looking at real estate," she said. "What exactly are you doing?" I laughed quietly. "I am just exploring opportunities," I said. I did not give her details, but the hesitation in her voice told me everything. For the first time, she was not the one ahead, the one with the red ribbon, the one praised at every turn. There was a crack in her perfection, and I smiled at it quietly. By the next holiday season, my life had shifted completely. I had multiple small properties, a growing portfolio, and more financial independence than I had ever imagined possible. I was no longer scrambling, no longer watching my sister or my parents dictate what I could or could not have. And the best part? I had done it entirely on my own. When I walked past that same red ribbon condo months later, I did not feel envy. I felt power, the quiet, unshakable kind that comes from creating something that is yours and yours alone. Then came the confrontation. My parents invited me over under the guise of a family dinner. I accepted as always, but this time I walked in with a quiet confidence they had never seen. My sister tried her usual bravado, showing off, talking about the holidays, her new car, the latest condo upgrades. But I did not flinch. I answered politely, calmly, with subtle hints of my own achievements. I just closed on a property in the city, I mentioned casually. My mother's fork paused mid-air. My dad's smile faltered. My sister blinked, as if she had just realized for the first time that I was no longer a child to be compared or dismissed. Over the next few minutes, the tension grew. They tried to dismiss my accomplishments, to belittle the investments, to claim that I was lucky. But I simply smiled. Luck had nothing to do with it. Every late night, every risk taken, every sleepless hour was proof that I was capable, that I had done it myself. And with every subtle nod of acknowledgement from my parents, I felt the scales shift. For the first time, I was not on the outside looking in. I had arrived. After that dinner, I continued to expand my empire quietly. I reinvested profits, diversified into new ventures, and even started mentoring a few young entrepreneurs who reminded me of the young, hungry version of myself. I was building influence not for ego, but because I had learned that true power is in independence, knowledge, and strategic relationships. And every time my sister or my parents saw another one of my successes, I could see the flicker of recognition, the realization that they could no longer dismiss me. But the final test of my journey came unexpectedly. My sister, desperate and jealous, tried to manipulate a joint family investment opportunity to her advantage. She assumed I would be intimidated or swayed by her charm or the family's expectations. But I had grown too much, built too much independence. I met her calmly, pointedly, and outlined terms that protected my interests. She faltered, realizing for the first time that I was not just capable but unyielding. The red ribbon, the condo, the handouts, it all meant nothing now. I had built everything that mattered from scratch, and no one could take it away. That night, I walked home past the city skyline, feeling a rare combination of relief and power. I had transformed from the overlooked, underestimated child into someone my family could neither ignore nor control. I had turned pain into motivation, criticism into strategy, and neglect into self-sufficiency. And the red ribbon? It no longer intimidated me. It was a symbol of what I had overcome, a reminder that success is sweetest when earned on your own terms. And as I looked at my reflection in the window of a passing car, I smiled quietly but fully, knowing that the person staring back was the only person who had ever needed to believe in me. My family had their judgments, their comparisons, their dismissive comments. I had something better, proof, autonomy, and the unstoppable knowledge that I had created my life from nothing, entirely on my own. It all came to a head the day my sister tried to sabotage one of my property deals. I had been working on a small commercial building, a fixer-upper with potential, and she found out through one of our mutual acquaintances. I could see it in her eyes at the next family gathering. She wanted to outshine me, to remind me and everyone else who had always been the favorite. But I had learned something powerful. Desperation is loud, but strategy is quiet. I played it cool, like I had no idea what she was plotting. I smiled, asked about her condo renovations, complimented her on the new appliances she had installed. She practically beamed, thinking she had me fooled. But I was already 3 steps ahead. I had anticipated this. I had anticipated her need for approval, her arrogance, her assumption that I was still the same person she could push around. She had no idea that I had spent months quietly building alliances with lawyers, real estate agents, and contractors who were all on my side. The night before the deal was set to close, I received a panicked call from one of my agents. "Your sister tried to undercut the offer," he whispered. She sent in fake paperwork claiming prior agreements. It almost derailed everything. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. This was it, the moment where all my preparation met opportunity. I did not freak out, I did not lash out. I smiled and calmly instructed my team to double-check every document, to ensure our contracts were airtight. My sister's sabotage would backfire spectacularly, and I was going to be there to watch it unfold. The next morning, I drove past her condo on my way to the signing. That red ribbon she had hung months ago to symbolize her success? I could not stop staring at it, thinking about how much it had motivated me. And now it was almost poetic. I walked into the meeting with confidence, dressed in a sharp suit I had bought with my own money, feeling the power that comes from building your life without handouts. My sister arrived a few minutes later, all smiles and fake cheer, completely unaware that she had already lost the battle. The deal began, and everything seemed normal at first. Then I subtly hinted to the lawyer overseeing the closing that there were questions about the prior agreements she had submitted. He leaned in, eyebrows raised, and began reviewing her documentation carefully. My sister shifted in her seat, the first sign of panic flashing across her face. I stayed calm, sipping my water, letting the tension build. I had learned that real power is quiet, the kind that waits for the right moment to strike. By the end of the meeting, the lawyer had caught the discrepancies. "These documents appear to be falsified," he said, eyes fixed on my sister. Her smile faltered, and she looked at me, pleading silently. I just nodded, letting the full weight of her own actions settle on her. The deal closed in my favor, and I walked out with the keys in my hand, a sense of triumph coursing through me. That day, I realized that revenge does not have to be loud or vengeful. Sometimes it is quiet, methodical, and devastatingly effective. When I returned home, I allowed myself a moment to breathe. I sat on my balcony looking at the city skyline, the cool evening breeze brushing against my face. I thought about how far I had come, from a child constantly compared, dismissed, and overlooked, to someone who had achieved independence and success entirely on her own. I realized that the pain I had endured, the neglect, and the favoritism had all been catalysts for my growth. I was no longer defined by their judgments. I was defined by my own actions, my own grit, and my own strategy. But my parents were not done. A week later, they invited me to another family dinner. This time, the atmosphere was thick with tension. My father tried to maintain his usual air of authority, but I could see the cracks. My mother, who always prided herself on control, seemed hesitant, unsure how to approach me now that I was no longer the powerless sibling she had always dismissed. And my sister, she avoided my gaze entirely. I could almost hear the wheels turning in her mind, wondering how I had turned the tables. During dinner, they tried to engage in small talk, but everything felt forced. I mentioned casually that I was considering expanding into commercial investments, maybe even starting a small firm. My father tried to scoff, but it came out weak, unconvincing. My mother changed the subject, directing attention toward my sister's latest purchases. I let it slide, smiling politely. I had learned that controlling my reactions was more powerful than any argument or retort. The shift in dynamics was palpable, and I could feel it. For the first time, I was no longer on the defensive. I was leading, subtly, effortlessly. Weeks later, I found out from a mutual friend that my sister had started questioning her own path. She was feeling the pressure, realizing that my independence and success were not going away. That red ribbon she had once flaunted with pride now felt like a distant memory, a symbol of her underestimation of me. I did not celebrate it outwardly. I just smiled quietly to myself, knowing that my victories were their own reward. Then came the final quiet act of revenge. I had been approached by a developer, looking to partner on a large residential project downtown. It was an ambitious move, but I knew it was my moment. I secured financing, contracts, and approvals faster than anyone had anticipated, positioning myself as the lead on a project my sister had been eyeing for months. When she realized, she tried to intervene, but the agreements were legally binding, strategically structured to protect my interests. She could do nothing but watch as I moved forward, unstoppable. The project became a statement, a declaration that I was no longer the overlooked child. When the city council approved the plans, I received a call from my parents. Their tone had shifted, subtle but undeniable. My father's voice held a hint of respect. My mother's words were cautious, almost admiring. Even my sister called, her voice tight with frustration and disbelief. "I did not realize you were capable of this," she said. I simply smiled and said, "I am." The conversation ended there, and for the first time, I felt complete. Over the next months, I continued to expand my investments, always strategically, always quietly, always ensuring that my independence remained untouchable. I mentored others, shared advice with those who were serious about building their own paths, and continued to grow. My family saw my progress, but they could not influence it, could not take it away. I had built an unshakable foundation, and nothing they did could undo it. The final realization hit me one evening as I sat in my office, overlooking the city lights. I thought about every slight, every dismissive comment, every comparison my family had made. Every instance of neglect had driven me to work harder, plan smarter, and persevere longer than I ever would have if I had been coddled or given everything. Pain had been my teacher, and strategy had been my weapon. I was no longer reacting. I was leading my own story, writing it with intention and power. And the red ribbon? It had been replaced months ago. The condo had sold for a handsome profit, purchased by someone else who did not care about our family drama. My sister had moved into a smaller apartment, recalibrating her own life, still under the shadow of comparison, still grappling with the reality that her younger sibling, once dismissed, overlooked, underestimated, had surpassed her in every meaningful way. I had no desire to gloat or rub it in. The satisfaction was internal, deep, and quiet. I had proven to myself, and only to myself, that I was capable of more than anyone, even my own family, had ever imagined. That is the kind of revenge that matters, the kind that transforms pain into progress, envy into respect, and weakness into undeniable strength. Looking back now, I realize that the entire journey was about more than money, property, or validation. It was about claiming my life, taking control of my narrative, and refusing to be defined by anyone else's judgments. My parents, my sister, they all learned their lessons in their own ways. But I had learned mine in the most important way. I am enough. I am capable. I am unstoppable. And so as I stand in my office, the city lights reflecting in the glass around me, I allow myself one final thought, one that I whisper quietly, almost like a promise. The people who told me I was on my own, who doubted me, who tried to keep me small, They no longer define me. I do, and I always will.